Afternoon, everybody. I'm Paul from Foundations, and your calendar isn't wrong. It is actually Thursday afternoon at 3, but I didn't have a chance to re-record the theme tune for today. We've got a special Foundations Live where we're going to be joined by officials from Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government to go through the consultation and the new allocations formula. So, afternoon, everybody. Just some quick introductions, as always, in case you're new to these events. So I'm Paul Smith. I'm Director at Foundations. We're the national body for home improvement agencies and the Disabled Facilities Grant in England, and we're funded by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. So we're able to help you with anything DFG and a home improvement agency related. And if you're looking for closed captions this afternoon and you're watching on the website, if you scroll down towards the bottom of the page, either on LinkedIn, Facebook or YouTube, you can find closed captions this afternoon. So as I mentioned, this is a special version of Foundations Live, where we're going to be joined by Caroline Jackson and Bilal Hussain from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, who are going to take us through the new allocations formula, what came out of the consultation that happened last year, and maybe a little bit about what's in store for the future.
Foundations Live.
So, welcome, Caroline.
Hello, Paul. Hello, everyone.
Let me add your slides to the stage, and over to you.
Thanks very much. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, we thought it might be just helpful to run through the outcome of the consultation we held on allocating DFG funding to local authorities and try to make sure that we've answered any questions and that people are clear on how the allocation formula is going to work in future. So just there we are. So that's what I'm planning to run through this afternoon. I'll talk through the new approach to the allocations. I'm going to say a little bit about what changed as a result of the consultation, and then I'm going to say a bit about the transition arrangements towards the new approach. And as Paul mentioned, my colleague Bilal Hussain is on hand if there are any technical questions about the formula. He's an economist who works very closely with us in terms of developing the approach. And we also have some other members of the team and the Department for Health team on hand. If you have questions in the chat, they'll be on hand to try and answer those and help with providing links, etc. And we can definitely share the slides afterwards as well. So just to introduce the topic. Yeah, we consulted last year, and I think more or less everything I'm going to say is in the response to the consultation that we published in February, and there'll be a link to that at the end of the slides. And basically, Disabled Facilities Grant funding home adaptations, it's a really important grant, and home adaptations we know are really critical for people to be able to live independently, and really supports this government's ambition to focus on prevention and support people as far as possible to live independently in the community. So it's really important that we therefore allocate the funding in the right way as fairly as possible and as aligned with local demand as we can, so that more adaptations reach those who really need them. And that's what we've tried to do in this new approach. And it was really needed because the allocation methodology had not been updated for over 15 years. It was really outdated and still using some data dating back to 2011 in it. And we'd had several reviews. For example, the 2018 review of the DFG recommended it should be brought up to date. And the consultation last year fulfilled a commitment by this government to do just that. And I think it's hopefully in broad terms aligned with the government's wider approach to reviewing local government funding as a whole and ensuring it's fair and up to date. So that's just by way of introduction. So I'll just dive into what we're trying to do with the new formula. What we're trying to do is to share out a national funding pot fairly, or as fairly as we can, between local authorities. So it's about relative demand. We're not trying to estimate how much you will how much demand you will actually have. We are trying to share out a pot fairly. So just to explain, that's what I mean by saying relative. It's about relative demand there. And we've focused the formula on the statutory DFG, the national rules that apply everywhere. We haven't tried to incorporate local policy differences. That would be very difficult to do, and it would probably not be very fair either, because some people have been able to have more generous local policies than others, and that's partly about how much funding they had under the old out-of-date approach. So we didn't think that would be right. So that's what we've tried to do in this new approach. And you can see there some of the factors that are included, but I'm actually going to go through those in a bit more detail on the next slide. So I'll move on. So the new formula, we are trying to basically look at the number of people who might apply for a DFG in each area. And we're trying to do that in a way that is fair and is based on sort of data that's robust and available consistently at local authority level, and so that it will be a formula that hopefully will last for a while, and balances being, it says simplicity here. I mean, it's not completely simple, I appreciate, but it's trying to balance being as fair as possible with still being understandable. And so that's what we've tried to do. And we use local population data and also DWP disability benefits data to estimate the number of disabled people in each area. We look at counting disabled adults and children separately, and then we've also added an estimate of older people who may not report themselves as being disabled, but we know many older people need adaptations in later life due to old age, frailties and conditions, and they may not think of themselves as being disabled. They may not report that or claim all the benefits they're entitled to. So we have added an estimate of older people on the top. So that's the basic starting point. And then we've made a number of adjustments to reflect the way the DFG works. And so we look at a local score of income deprivation, and that is applied to the adults that we've counted, both the disabled adults and the older people, because adults are means tested for the DFG. And so we want to kind of focus on the people on the lowest incomes who are going to be the people eligible. And then we've counted the disabled children separately. No income adjustment is made for disabled children because they are not means tested for DFG. And in fact, we've added a weighting. So we've added a weighting because we know that children's adaptations often cost more. So we've added an extra 25% to every child that we're counting to reflect the additional costs, which we were aware of from previous work looking at high value adaptations. We then look at the proportion of non-council housing in each area. That's because the DFG funding we provide from central government is not for DFGs in HRA stock, which should be funded separately from the HRA. So we're focusing our funding here on the homeowners, private rented and housing association tenants. So we look at the proportion of that type of housing in each area. And we then also apply an adjustment for variation in building costs. We know building costs can vary around the country for a number of reasons, and we're using a building cost index, which is built up from looking at the cost of all building contract tenders in each area. So that will reflect variations in costs for any reason, which could include the age and condition of housing stock locally, or the topography, or whether it's a rural area, whether there are higher labour costs, materials costs. So that building cost index should capture all those variations and produce a sort of relative score for each local authority there. And then finally, we've applied what we're calling a grant upper limit adjustment. What that means is that and this basically applies to the Isles of Scilly and the City of London, two very, very small local authorities. And after applying this formula, they would otherwise get less than 30,000. So we've adjusted their grant level to ensure that every local authority gets at least 30,000. And so what we're trying to do there is produce a sort of fair share. So doing all that, we'll come up with a number. And if you add all the numbers for all the local authorities, you get a national total. So then you can compare each local authority to the national total to produce a share. So I hope you are sort of with me. That's what we're trying to do in the formula. And this is the technical bit. This is the mathematical formula, which describes what I've said already in words. And just to cover the data we are using in the formula. So in counting disabled adults, disabled children and older people, we are looking at a survey called the Family Resources Survey in each case. We've used the 23-24 survey, which is the latest available. That has an estimate of numbers of people who would consider themselves disabled or older. But then we are also, because that survey is only available at a regional level, we have used DWP benefit data as set out here to look at the local level and the local differences in how many disabled adults or children there are. And we also look at the ONS population estimates of older people. And then in terms of income deprivation that I mentioned, and thinking about the means test, that's taken from the 2025 Index of Multiple Deprivation that was published end of last year. The data on housing stock comes from MHCLG data from 2024, and the Building Cost Information Service produces the tender price indices that look at the building costs. So that's all the data in case you want to know about that. So I'm now going to go on briefly to talk about what changed as a result of the consultation. And I just want to thank everybody, by the way, who responded to the consultation. We did look at all the responses and there were some really helpful comments and suggestions in there. So just to summarise what you said to us, there were 227 responses to the consultation. That included 188 people who were local authority responses, and other responses came from individuals and other organisations with an interest. And out of everybody who answered, 88.3% agreed broadly with the new approach, with the principles of it. So that seemed to us to be a pretty strong support. 74% wanted to change some details of it, and I'll go on to what we changed in a minute. 89% though asked us to phase in the new approach to give local authorities time to adjust, and that is what we're doing. And we are including a funding floor based on a percentage of previous allocations, which is the option that had the majority support. So in terms of changes, 159 responses wanted a change of some kind or other, including some of the things set out here, changes to the way we calculated different terms of the formula, changes to the data we were going to use, or other changes. So this slide is trying to summarize what we've done as a result. So first of all, I mean, this formula, as I said at the start, we're trying to share out a national funding pot in the fairest way between local authorities. So it's really important, obviously, that we do capture differences between local areas. And some people pointed out that I think our original proposal had been to just use regional level variation in building costs and in child disability prevalence, and some respondents pointed out that it would be better to look down to the local level for that. And I think when we reflected on it, we thought you're absolutely right, and we should have done that. So we have looked to use local building cost information. There was a couple of areas where that particular index didn't have local level information, and we've had to use regional. I think Isles of Scilly, for example, being one where we've had to look at Cornwall instead. But in general, it did have local information. So we've adjusted to that. And in terms of childhood disability, we looked at a range of options there, and I think we've recognised that actually disability living allowance does have data on at a local level on children's claims, which we have used to help adjust to reflect differences between local authorities there. Also, we added a weighting, which I mentioned earlier, on the children's adaptations to reflect the higher costs. That was pointed out by a few people, and again, we thought that that's right. And quite a lot of people wanted us to make sure we were using the most recent data, and we did do that, and we have included, for example, the indices of multiple deprivation that came out in end of last year, rather than the previous set in 2019. So those are some of the changes we've made. There were other things people asked for that we decided that we didn't need to do, or that it was maybe impossible to do with the data available. I maybe two many to go through in depth, but if people have specific questions after on those, I'm happy to answer in the Q&A in a bit. And finally, going to just go on to the transition to the new approach and how the formula is going to be phased in, because it is being phased in. So basically a new allocation formula obviously means changes to the share of the fund that everybody gets, each local authority gets, and it's going to mean some people get a higher share of the pot, some people get a lower share than they had before. We think that it should mean a fairer share based on all the factors I've talked about and more recent data, but nevertheless we recognise if a local authority has put in place local policies to reflect the funding they got, and obviously quite rightly wanted to spend that on adaptations for local people, they will need time to adjust. You may need to look again at your local policy, and we basically recognise that takes time. So this new allocation approach is going to be phased in over several years and in a gradual way. And for 26-27, so for the funding that will be allocated, it's normally paid out in May, and in 26-27 the total pot we know will be 723 million, and so we want to make sure that no one receives less than they did last year in the main allocations, which were announced June of 2025, and we've put in place a funding floor so that every LA will get at least the same as they were allocated in June last year, or in some cases more. In fact, I think the majority will get a bit more. This obviously means a trade-off. So the LAs that would otherwise have had a lower share are protected, but the ones that would gain under the new approach will also move gradually. But hopefully that gives everyone time to adjust and means that there's not undue impacts on local people and local budgets. So that's the idea of the transitional approach. And for future years, so in responses to the consultation, people wanted certainty in the future as far as possible, and the majority of respondents wanted a fairly high level of income protection, and so that is a more gradual phase in. So the government has committed to continue transitional protection for at least the next 2 years, with the sort of percentages set out here compared to June 2025. In 2027-28, the response document commits that all local authorities will receive at least 97.5%, and in 28-29 all local authorities would receive at least 95% of the funding they received in June 2025. Now the exact amounts that each local authority will receive will depend on the total pot and how much that is, which hasn't been announced yet. So we don't know yet, and we can't calculate yet what exactly everybody will have, but at least this gives you, I hope, all a sort of minimum amount so that you can plan. At least for the next 2 years. It's likely that we will need further transitional protection after that, but I think we will want to decide that nearer the time when we know more about future budgets. In terms of other future changes, we know that a number of local authorities are going through process of reorganisation and forming new unitary authorities. So just to confirm, if you are going to move to a new unitary authority, and if that new unitary authority follows pre-existing boundaries of previous districts, then the new allocation will add up the allocation of those districts that are joining together. If we end up in a situation where there are new unitary authorities drawing completely new boundaries that no one's ever used before, then we will have to think about that. But it's likely it would be based on some share of the population. So I hope that helps for those undergoing those reorganisations. And many people asked us to keep the data up to date, which we definitely intend to do as far as we can in future. So really that was the end of the presentation, and I know there'll be some questions, and I've seen lots of chat going on. So, but just to alert you to some sources of information, and as I say, we can share the slides and these links afterwards. The first one is the link to the consultation response, which does cover, I think, everything I've said here. The second link is a link to a fair share calculator, which we've put online. That will tell you, it shows all the underlying data as far as we can share it publicly that we've used in the calculations, and it shows you what your fair share would be under the formula before applying the transitional protection. I think foundations are also working on a plain English explanation, I think they're calling it, so Paul might say something about that, and that'll be available soon. And you're welcome to contact ourselves at MHCLG or foundations as well. So I think, Paul, that's really the end of my presentation. So I don't know if there are any questions coming in.
There are a few. There's some of the questions you then answered later in the presentation. So we won't go over those again. Just in terms of Steve's question, and again, I think you did answer this towards the end of the presentation. I don't think there is any minimum commitment to funding increases going forwards past the end of the, certainly after the end of the current spending review. Is there? It's set out at minimum 97.5 and 95% for the kind of couple of years after 26-27, isn't it?
That is right, Paul. Yes, that is right.
Yeah. And we've, as well as the kind of plain English explanation that Caroline mentioned, we've also put together a calculator that does compare your existing share with what the new share is. So it'll be easier for you to work that out. We're just double checking the numbers at the moment, make sure it gives you the right figures. But that should be available soon as well. Which I think also answers Becky's question in terms of. I think kind of the new calculator will help you back in terms of working out what the comparison is.
Yes, that's right, Paul. And thank you for doing that. I think that will be really helpful for local authorities.
Sharon asked about, so I assume Sharon's worked out that after the formula has been fully implemented, their allocation goes down by 1.5 million, but or potentially. But again, I suppose that depends what the budget is in the future and the other protections that you mentioned that may continue afterwards as well, Caroline. So
yes, I mean, the fair share calculator that we've published shows you what your share would be if we jumped straight to it, but actually we're not jumping straight to the new allocations. We are protecting local authorities, and we recognise the response was only published in February, which is not long before the start of the financial year in April next week, in fact. So no authority is going to get for 26, 27, nobody will get less than they got in June 2025. Nobody will get less than that. There is protections there in place. So the calculator is showing you what your fair share would be if we jump straight to it, just so you can see how it's being worked out. But then there are transitional protections applied after that. So you will not get any less than you got in June 2025. And I should say all the actual allocations are in the back of the consultation response. There is a full list of every local authority and the amount of money for 26, 27. So you can look at that and see exactly what will be coming out in May.
Yes, so I think that also answers Christopher's question. So he's used the fair share, and 0.62% gives more, but not every, because the protection for those that might have gone down, not everybody's getting their full increase either. It's phased in for the increases as well as the decreases, isn't it? Yeah. So once you get the second version of the calculator that we're doing, Christopher, I think will help you to see those figures in comparison. So let's have a look. What else have we had? And David asked about means testing. Is anything you can say on means testing at this point, Caroline?
Is this about actually amending the means test itself?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, so at the moment, this change is about how we share out funding to local authorities. So we are aware that obviously the 2018 review and has made other recommendations too, such as looking at the means test, and we are aware that that is something we need to do at some point in the future, but I can't tell you when at the moment that would be. I have to say it's something we are looking at, but yeah, I have no date or right now.
You. Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of other questions on the means test, which I think you've covered there. For any areas that are concerned about their allocations, I think you put your pop the email addresses back there. So if anybody is kind of particularly concerned, that they can obviously email either yourselves or foundations. The email's there for anybody who needs it. But I think, as you said, it was one of the recommendations from the 2018 review, and as I kind of said the other day, I think this is the kind of the fairest that DFG allocations have ever been. It will obviously take a little while to work through any changes, because as you said, they haven't been updated for a little while, but objectively it will be the kind of fairest formula. Whether you can go up or go down, it will be, I think, objectively the fairest it's ever been. So just having a look, see if anything else has come through. So I think, Sharon, certainly we can pick, or regional advisors are able to kind of pick this up with you afterwards if you want to go through it. And I think when our version of the calculator comes out, I think it will make it a lot clearer what you will get for future years. But basically, if your fair share does go down, you'll get the same in 26, 27 as you had in 25, 26, and for 27, 28, it will only go down by 2.5% at the most. So, and then only down by another 2.5% the year after that. So for the next 3 years, that the most it will go down in that third year is 5%.
Yes, that's right, Paul.
I think this one from Charlotte. I guess this is in the last 3 years. There's been additional funding announced. I think it was kind of in December, January. So I guess again that we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, it's
Yes.
happened it's happened fairly regularly. But obviously that's not a guarantee of funds again in future years, is it?
It's not. I can't say at the moment if there would be any further funding. That's been a decision that ministers have taken. Yes, in previous years, each year they have added funding later in the year. So it could happen again, but I can't guarantee it. If it does, we would be looking to use this new approach, I think, as we allocate any additional funding as well from now on. So we'll be looking to do that. But I can't say, I'm sorry, Paul, I don't know myself. So I'm not trying to hide anything. We don't know at the moment.
Yeah. So I suppose it's a question around, I suppose it's other DFG or using DFG for other social care purposes, isn't it? Which has obviously been part of the grant conditions for about 10 years or so now, isn't it? Is it anything to answer Lisa's question on that one, Caroline? Is it again?
Well, I think this is a sort of a local decision, really. I mean, if your authority is able to meet all its statutory DFG requirements and ensure the people who are entitled to adaptations get them, and you think you will have additional, there will be budget left over, then there are a range of ways you can look as a local authority to spend that budget, and we would encourage you to spend the budget and not to just keep rolling it over. You can do your own local policy to have a more generous home adaptation service locally. You can waive the means test in certain, in circumstances you think, or you could have a higher grant maximum. So you could do a more generous local policy. And as the questioner said, there is also scope to look at other social care capital projects. They must be capital because the funding we provide is capital. So that means, so for example, we know that people have used it to put adaptations into some forms of homeless temporary accommodation, which might not be eligible for DFG because you wouldn't be living there for 5 years. But if you're going to have people who need that accessible temporary accommodation, that could be a social care capital project. But I think that you might want to speak to foundations and your regional advisors about your particular local situation there. But that's what the funding can be spent on.
Great, thanks, Caroline. And just to clarify, Christo, I wasn't saying that the current calculator is wrong. That the one we've developed has some additional comparisons in it between kind of this year and next year, which you may find helpful. They both have the same figures in. We just added a little bit more context to it. So look, I think we're probably getting through most of the questions now. I think you've already answered this one as well, Caroline, in terms of carrying forward DFG funding. Obviously better to spend it if you can, and if you're struggling to spend it, please do get in touch with us, and we're here to assist with improving your processes and procedures. But
I have to say that we provide the funding on the basis that it's needed and on the expectation it will be spent on adapting people's homes and other capital projects that will enable people to live independently in line with your local BCF plan. And if the Treasury got wind there were lots of underspends here, we don't want to be in that position. We don't want to be in the position where we are, asked to claw back underspends. We absolutely don't. So what I would say is, do spend your DFG allocation. Obviously, we understand there's always a bit of movement from year to year, and there will be a little bit of adjustment around the edges. You may get a lot of applications one year and less the next. So we do understand that, but this funding is not provided so that local authorities can build up a large amount of underspend year on year. That's not what it's there for. So do spend your allocations.
and hopefully the new formula will help with that, because obviously the idea is to direct the funds to where it's most needed. And I think kind of whenever you have a formula, there's always going to be some issues around the edges of it in terms of very, very kind of local issues. But it is, as I said, I think kind of most of the issues are due to the way it was allocated before, rather than the difference to the way it's going to be allocated in the future, isn't it? Rather than something inherently with the new formula. So I think we're kind of getting towards the end of the questions on the allocations formula. There's kind of a couple of others popped up, mostly on means testing and other bits and pieces. But thank you for joining us today, Caroline. And Bilal's got off quite lightly, hasn't he, with any technical questions?
Yes, but no, thank you, and thank you all for joining and your interest in the topic. And Paul, I'm sure you'll be able to forward around the slides to people, will you, so that you'll have the contact details in the back and the other resources.
Yeah. If you could send them over, Caroline, we can circulate them to everyone who's attended. That's no problem. Great. Well, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Foundations Live.
So, hope you found that useful. I say we've got a relatively plain English version of the of what kind of Caroline described as the new formula coming out relatively soon. And for those of you, I suppose, just want to follow it, that the basic formula is number of disabled adults, number of older people, number of children with a disability, and you add a little bit more for the children with a disability to give you a kind of total number of people. For areas that have council housing, it comes down a bit. For areas with high deprivation, it goes up a bit. And for areas with high building costs, it goes up a bit as well. So it's tweaked slightly by those variables, and then that gives you your share of the overall pot of 723 million. But it will be phased in over a number of years. So hopefully that helps with your understanding of it. And when you get to see the page on the website, it'll say that in a little bit more detail, along with a calculator that compares what you would have had, or what you did have this year, with what you'll get for the next 3 years, or at least an estimate of that, which hopefully will be quite helpful. So just in terms of other bits and pieces that we've got coming up, we've got the last two DFG Champions Roadshows coming up in London on the, when are they? On the 15th and 16th of April. And we've got the DFG Quality Mark cards, which have been going down very well at the roadshows. We've got the last box of those to give out on the 15th and 16th of April. We've kept a few back, so there are now a few extra tickets released for both of those dates if you'd like to come and join us in Chiswick. And we will also be holding a conference on home adaptations in social housing on the 1st of July at the Bridgewater Hall in Manchester. And that's all about how housing associations and local authorities can work together better, which is a topic that comes up very, very frequently in our inbox. It's also looking at how housing associations can make the best use of their stock, both in terms of building new stock that's accessible and adaptable, and how through kind of decent homes and retrofitting programs, they can also improve the accessibility of their stock, so that less adaptations are required in the future, alongside how everyone can support tenants better through that process. So last few early bird tickets are available for that now, and it'd be great to see many of you in Manchester on the 1st of July. And our next Foundations Live is on the 21st of April, where we've got a variety of speakers talking about I suppose kind of the alternatives to retirement housing for older people, and how kind of what sometimes called naturally occurring retirement communities, and kind of keeping people in their own homes and their own communities can be both of benefit, and how kind of that can be practically achieved. So please do join us on the 21st of April. But that's it for this afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this special one-off edition of Foundations Live on a Thursday afternoon. And if you do need any more details on the allocations formula, new page will be up very soon. But if not, get in touch with our regional advisors, and they'll be able to talk you through either the formula or how that will affect your allocations for the next 3 years. So thank you all. See you all again on the 21st of April, if we don't see you in London for the roadshows.